water, sanitation, and hygiene approach, and emergency food security and vulnerable livelihoods with gender and protection, disaster risk reduction, peace, and environmental initiatives integrated across all sectors. We are focused on reducing the impact of increased refugee population on the environment by promoting more durable, sustainable, cost-effective, and environmentally friendly innovations, such as the use of clean energy, prepaid water meters, solar pumping water schemes, ground and surface water monitoring, solid waste management, and transformation of eco-sludge into fuel briquettes as well as biogas. All these measures linked at addressing deforestation by providing alternative clean energy options. Oxfam is also committed to influencing for the restoration and rehabilitation of severely degraded land and other ecosystems through promotion of wetland and forestry rehabilitation practices that conserve soil fertility, minimize disturbance and erosion, and avoid contamination of groundwater sources. Our aim is to reduce the negative environmental and social impact of local systems and to strengthen local preparedness and resilience of refugees and host communities through improved natural resources management and disaster risk mitigation. We anticipate that the conversations we will have this morning will be geared towards finding sustainable ways. And I must emphasize that the country director really hopes that these conversations will be geared towards finding sustainable ways of intensifying efforts and preparations to mitigate, manage, and respond to disasters. So I thank you all for holding me.
Let's have another round of applause for Honorable Minister. I realized she was also talking about refugees, and then I just remembered, because of our open policy, our hospitality as Ugandans, our friendliness as a people, many people have come here to live amongst us because they are running away from conflicts in our region. And I'm told in some parts of West Nile, Honorable Minister, in some cases, the number of refugees is about to overtake or supersede the number of the host community. But they are living off the environment in a manner that is not sustainable, and that is likely to cause some chaos or conflict. So that's an issue maybe to address. But even if we don't talk about refugees, think about it. For any person in Uganda who's going to have dinner or lunch today, maybe 98% of those, Honorable Minister, will have dinner prepared either using charcoal or wood. Which means the forest cover is being depleted at an incredible speed because we just have to eat. And yes, we must. But how many of us have planted trees? And imagine how many trees have been depleted because we just have to have a meal. Things like those. The other day I picked a camera and went around Kampala to see the number of refugees in Uganda. It is also good to see that some of them have come with their skills, with expertise, and their business acumen, and they are making dividends in Kampala, which is also a good thing. Honorable Minister, may I now invite our next speaker to give us remarks. Chief of Mission IOM, Sanusi Jajan, if I pronounce it right. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Honorable Minister of State for Relief, Disaster Preparedness and Relief, my own sister, my former colleague, my everything, representative from the European Union and members of the diplomatic and consular corps present here this morning, members of parliament present here this morning, the Accountant General, UN agency colleagues present here this morning, Permanent Secretary present here this morning, representative of government, ministry, department, and agency present here this morning, Mr. Julius Mukunda, OSBAD representative from Oxfam, representative from local governments, representative from non-governmental organization and civil society present here this morning, members of the 40 states, esteemed ladies and gentlemen, good morning, assalamu alaikum. It is a great pleasure and honor for me to make remarks and be part of this very important national dialogue meeting on contingency planning and funding in Uganda. I would like to commend the Office of the Prime Minister and Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group for organizing this very important meeting. IOM takes this discussion very, very seriously, but there is a need to intensify our efforts towards mitigation, management, and response to disaster through operationalization of national contingency plans. IOM is profoundly proof of our strained relationship with the Office of the Prime Minister, especially the Department of Disaster Preparedness and Management. This is because many of the issues in IOM mandate are also issues that the department handles. As you know, internal displacement is one of the issues on which IOM is mandated to support the government and people of Uganda. This is because once people are forced out of their homes, for example, by natural disasters, they become internal displaced, IDPs, they become migrants. I had a lot about refugees. You cannot become refugee in your own country, but you can become migrant, and you can also internal displaced IDPs. Uganda has been experiencing the impact of climate change, which manifested in a steady increase of annual rainfalls with variability of duration. As a result, the country is registering an increasing number of disasters, including drought, flood, landslide, mudslides, among others. Today, no country is spared from risk and exposure to the effects and impact of climate and extreme weather events that result into environmental hazards, sudden and slow onset disasters. To mention a few extreme heat waves, flooding, drought, and displacement of population resulting into migration will only become more frequent in a warming climate. Climate change affects the livelihoods, health, and safety of peoples, and it shapes people's decision to migrate. Migration is an inevitably reality that has been with humanity as history can tell, but movement of people needs to be out of choice and not force of adverse or life-threatening conditions, including effect of climate change. Honorable Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, IOM believes that there is a critical need to address the direct linkage between climate change and migration. Hence the reason we were in COP27 with a delegation from the government of Uganda. And I'm happy to say at least the delegation from Uganda came back happily because we made progress in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Today, loss and damage has been captured into the document. Human mobility is also been captured into the document. So we are preparing ourselves for COP28 in Dubai. Together, these issues impact our society deeply, and their linkage must be acknowledged and addressed urgently. Contemporary migration governance, policy, and practice must reflect the significance of environmental disaster and climate change factors on human mobility. Environmental factors must be integrated across all areas of migration management, including prevention, preparedness, and response to displacement, border management, labor migration, and integration, and return and reintegration. Hence, the UN Network for Migration urges states to strengthen their commitment and address the reality that people increasingly migrate to adapt to the adverse effects of climate change. The UN Network on Migration was launched recently in Uganda, co-chaired by myself and the representative of the Office of Human Rights. Taking into ambitious and urgent climate change mitigation and adaptation action and facilitating safe, orderly, and regular migration of people affected by climate change will be critical. This including enhancing the availability and accessibility of regular migration pathway and ensuring decent work for migrant workers. Considering the strong linkages between environment preservation and disaster risk reduction, IOM Uganda has been implementing several projects aimed at supporting data availability to strengthening environment policy governance or contributing to disaster risk reduction. Honorable Minister, ladies and gentlemen, let me just mention a few IOM's collaborative initiatives with the Office of the Prime Minister under the Disaster Risk Reduction Program. As the Office of the Prime Minister develops the National Disaster Preparedness and Management Bill that is linked to key policies and legislation, IOM shall be supporting 4 consultative workshops. IOM, with support of European Union humanitarian aid, is working in close collaboration with the Office of the Prime Minister, Department of Disaster Preparedness. Presently, IOM is supporting various government efforts through the projects titled Strengthening National and Local Disaster Preparedness and Response Capacity. This is a 15-month initiative with the overall aim of addressing capacity gaps in disaster preparedness. Capacity building for district disaster management committees on disaster, data collection and reporting with 20 districts targeted. These include sub-country district disaster management committee in target districts, capacity building for OPM, disaster management, and NECOC on disaster management planning response, supporting the disaster information collection and dissemination mechanism at district and national level, harmonizing of data collection and analysis tools for disaster reporting, supporting DRR coordination in collaboration with the Office of the Prime Minister. Honorable Minister, IAM is committed to supporting government in the development of the disaster contingency planning and funding process in Uganda. Hence the reason we are here this morning. Through our program on migration, environment, and climate change, we will partner with government to integrate and reflect the significance of environmental degradation and climate change on migration, human mobility in Uganda, legal policies, and programmatic framework. While significant steps have been taken into the national policy for disaster preparedness and management in Uganda, more effort is still needed. I have no doubt that together we can make a great progress in ensuring effective implementation of the policy. Honorable Minister, ladies and gentlemen, let me end by reiterating IOM's commitment to supporting the government of Uganda in our efforts to attain the sustainable development goals which are aligned to the National Development Plan and the Vision 2040. Asante Sana. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
He's a hate master, right? Okay, another round of applause to Mr. Sanusi Tijan. Thank you very much, sir. And he also talked about the refugees. And let me also, maybe a few things that I've heard from Sanusi, that the refugees are here and they're in big numbers. Honorable Minister, ladies and gentlemen, we live in a tumultuous region. As we speak right now, the guns are raging in the Congo. And they have been raging for quite some time. If you're not careful, we could see migrations of biblical proportion. What can we do? The resources may not be enough, but also the goodness of the Ugandan people can be overstretched. So we have to find a way. And I remember reading, we all know that this country is called the Pearl of Africa. It's called the Pearl of Africa because of our environment, our forest cover that was pristine by then. The man who called us the Pearl of Africa 100 years ago, I wonder if he was to come back, whether he would call us again the Pearl of Africa. So yes, we face disasters because we have not lived sustainably with our environment. May I, at this juncture, once again invite Mr. Julius Mukunda to come and invite for us the Minister of State for Relief, Disaster Preparedness and Refugees to give us the opening remarks. Yes, it's a matter of protocol. I can't. Maybe you also want to have information to pass on once more.
Thanks. Before I invite the Minister, also is to recognize a key member and the supporter for this activity from EU. EU, you are most welcome to this meeting. But also, I would like to thank our friend, the Accountant General of Uganda. I don't know how many of you know the Accountant General of Uganda. Yes, and we have our own fights, but we have our good fights. That's the most important part. Thank you so much for reserving this time to educate us, especially about contingency planning and budgeting. For me, that's very key and very, very, very important. Without saying any much more, may I now invite the State Minister for disaster preparedness to come and deliver his keynote address. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The members of Parliament, Your Excellency, the ambassadors, heads of mission, the UN representative, and especially my boss, if I was still working with IOMs, Nusa, the representatives of the donor agencies, EU, most especially, the Permanent Secretary, Office of the Prime Minister, and I know my friend and a brother, the Accountant General. When you're here, I'm very happy. The Chief Executives of institutions present, especially CS BAG, Julius and team, the academias, all our partners, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you all for the National Dialogue Strengthening Disaster Contingency Plan and funding at the national and district level. The dialogue is a joint arrangement of Government of Uganda, international organizations for migration, and also the civil society represented by the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group, that is CSBAG, intended to bring together stakeholders involved in the disaster risk management. This is to create awareness on the recently launched National Disaster Risk Management Plan and the practice operationalize ties and resourcing in relation to the National Contingency Funding Framework and other partners' support. Reflection on the current state of contingency planning and budgeting process, as well as prevailing challenges and possible solutions that can be considered by the policymakers and relevant government entities. I would like to acknowledge the efforts of the DRM actors for the remarkable steps towards the institutionalizing risk management in both the third National Development Plan and the recent launch of the Disaster Risk Management Plan. This dialogue should explore a mechanism for effective financing the structures identified in the National Disaster Management Policy, for the coordination of disaster preparedness and response interventions, including operationalization and multi-hazard contingency plan of MDAs and district local governments. I'm reliably informed that a number of districts have developed multi-hazard contingency plans, and some of them in the process of operationalizing the plans. These plans should be integrated into the district, ministries, department, agencies, and also other plans to ensure the implementation. I wish to appreciate the European Union, humanitarian aid, ECHO, that have really played a big role, the committed resources through various implementing partners. I want to attest that at least Oxfam, one of them, and I think CRS are one of the organizations that I managed to see them during my time. The projects for development and also completion of multi-hazard contingency plans in Karamoja, the West Nile sub-region, and other refugee hosting districts. I call upon EU and other partners to consider extending such support to other risk areas, non-refugee hosting districts such as, of course, Elgon, which you're already taking care of. We also have Bukedi, Lango, Acholi, as well as part of the central and western Uganda, like Bundubujo, Kisoro, and Kasese. The entire undertaking multiple hazard contingency plan should consider involvement of private sector in the processes. A holistic approach involving the government, partners, and communities and businesses is very critical for strengthening and operationalization of the contingency plan. We know very well that the conversation has already started, and we are seriously following up on the bill. Yesterday, I managed to present the bill to the top management of Office of the Prime Minister, of which the next step is going to go to Cabinet, and then from Cabinet, the rest of the checklist will be completed. And I want to thank you all, those who have been really putting us on pressure to ensure that we have this bill working. I trust that this dialogue will generate positive outcome and practical recommendations for actions in the near future, and therefore I will declare this dialogue open. But I want to say that since my brother is here, my happiness is that he knows very well, and I know where the issue is, that the contingency funds that we have come to discuss here today will be the right person to tell us how we should be able to support disaster issues. And I appeal to all partners who are here to continue supporting government and also the department, especially on how we should be able to operationalize the National Disaster Risk Plan, especially my friend, Accountant General, for God and my country.
Of the Honorable Kamba Paul, Member of Parliament for Busiku constituency, and we have Acting Commissioner Disaster Preparedness with us, and other people. I'll be introducing them as I get to see them. Thank you so much. And at this juncture, that is we're going to. We have been allowed. The dialogue has officially been opened. Oh, Alex, okay. Alex, you're covered. Oh, sorry, I hadn't seen you. Thank you so much, Honorable, for joining us. You're so close to me, and then I couldn't. I'm sorry. My bad. So, at this juncture, we have State of Contingency Planning for Disaster Risk Management in Uganda, a presentation which will show us where we are, what we need to do, where we have scored and where we have not. I hope all of us are going to pay attention, because remember, we have a panel discussion, and some of these presentations will help us in the panel discussion so that we can really try to add value on the issues that affect our country. So may I invite a representative who's giving us a presentation, State of Contingency Planning for Disaster Risk Management in Uganda, the Permanent Secretary, Office of the Prime Minister.
Thank you. Catherine Imsiwe is my name. I'm the Acting Commissioner Relief, Disaster Preparedness and Management. Apologies from the Permanent Secretary. He could not come himself. He got official engagements early in the morning. So I'll make the presentation on behalf of the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Keith Mahakanisi, Office of the Prime Minister. The presentation outline, it has a background, what is a contingency plan, why do we need contingency plans, status of contingency planning in Uganda, achievements, challenges, recommendations and conclusions. Background. The National Disaster Preparedness and Management Policy 2011 identifies 15 different hazards that vary in space, time, and magnitude. The most devastating hazards are floods, drought, oil spills. Uganda is in the process of developing its oil and gas resources, so that's why we had to capture the oil spill as a hazard. pandemics to which the plans have been developed at national level. According to the 2016 National Development Gain Index, Uganda is ranked 14th most vulnerable and 48th least ready country, particularly to hydrometeorological hazards. What is a contingency plan? A contingency plan is a course of action designed to help entities to respond effectively to a significant event that may or may not happen. In terms of disaster risk management, it is a management process that analyzes disaster risks and establishes arrangements in advance to enable timely, effective, and appropriate responses. A contingency plan also allows key actors to envision, anticipate, and solve problems that can arise during disasters. The last point basically is about preparedness for disasters, and I think that's why we are here today. Next slide, I continue to talk about what is contingency planning. In Uganda, we have two types of contingency plans. One, the single hazard contingency plan. This is developed at national level. It includes El Nino, floods, La Nina, droughts, contingency plan, the national oil spill contingency plan, pandemic preparedness plan. Most times, the single hazard contingency plan is developed when we anticipate a disaster. For example, when we get a weather forecast and it shows that season we are likely to have an El Nino or a drought, we come together with both MDAs and other partners to develop such a plan. Multi-hazard contingency plans, these are developed for use at district level due to the numerous and concurrent disasters. These multi-hazard contingency plans are based on the hazard, risk, and vulnerability profiles, so they cover a number of hazards. Why do we need a contingency plan? To safeguard and make available vital resources such as materials, supplies, and equipment to ensure safety and recovery from predictable disasters. Reduce the risk of disasters on lives, livelihoods, infrastructure, and the environment. Quick recovery time. Contingency plans reduce response time, giving the response teams full control of situations. Status of contingency planning in Uganda. The Public Finance Management Act 2015 provides for a contingencies fund to respond to natural disasters, and that is 15%, and where required, more than 15% of the money may be used to finance disasters. Since enactment of the Public Finance Management Act 2015, there has been release of funds from contingencies fund to respond to disasters. For example, this financial year, when we experienced the food insecurity in Karamoja, OPM requested for release of money from the contingencies fund, and 20 billion was released towards response to food insecurity in Karamoja and other areas. At the local government level, multi-hazard contingency plan coverage today stands at 21% in Karamoja, West Nile, parts of Southwestern and Teso. Yes, 21%. You realize the next slide is a map. Thank you. The next slide, the map showing the current status of district level contingency planning in Uganda, 2018-19 to 2022/2023. You observe that there was a gap. We have been supported by IOM, Uganda Red Cross Society, with funding from the EU to develop contingency plans at local government level, but because of the COVID challenges, some of these activities could not be undertaken for about 2 years. So we just resumed toward the end of last year to date. So that's why we are still at 21%. You also observe that most of the areas covered, according to the map, please go back to the map. It is Karamoja that is at a very high risk, and then the other districts in West Nile, Western, and Isinjiro, they are areas that that host refugees. Other districts that have been covered because of the high risk of floods, it is Teso. This next slide, please. The graphical representation, status of district level contingency plan 2018 to 2022/23. So that is the graphical representation. We are 21%, which is in blue, and we still have 79% to cover. You can see we still have a very big gap. Achievements in contingency planning. Response to disaster victims across the country using funds released from contingencies fund. Yes, like I mentioned from the previous years, the COVID victims, the floods, affected persons, the landslides, and food insecurity. Government managed to respond to all these disasters with funds from the contingencies fund. Then 4 national level contingency plans developed and regularly updated. That is the floods, drought, oil spills, pandemics, stroke epidemics. 31 district level contingency plans have also been developed. Capacities have been developed at central and local government levels for development and update of the plans, including trigger setting. Challenges to contingency planning. Most sectors have not yet adopted the culture of developing their own contingency plans for risk mitigation at sector level. If we are to move forward, we need to move mainstream contingency planning and disaster risk reduction in other sectors. So there is still this big challenge where sectors are reluctant to develop contingency plans. The next one is limited resource allocation due to competing priorities in government and partner budgets. Third, limited appreciation of the contingency planning process by other players. The private sector is rarely involved, yet disaster risks equally affect their businesses. If you were to ask private sector how many of them have business continuity plans, I doubt would get even 50%. So, limited integration of multi-hazard contingency plans into the development plans of respective districts. Recommendations. Leverage resources from the disaster risk management plan, seed fund, to this key process of strengthening preparedness. The disaster risk management plan provides for both preparedness, response, recovery, rehabilitation, and disaster risk reduction. So some of the activities in there are to develop the contingency plans in other districts. Address the funding gap for disaster risk management operations in the district local governments. Just that disasters, like I said, they are increasing and the magnitude, but clearly we see that we still have a limitation if we are still at 21%. So we need to also look at other districts outside the refugee hosting districts. Actualize the contingency fund in the Public Finance Management Act 2015 to ensure its timely availability for addressing contingency planning gaps. Expand the current thematic and geographical areas of focus to beyond Karamoja and West Nile stroke refugee hosting districts in the funded priorities by partners. Ministries, departments, and agencies should adopt the practice of contingency planning, focusing on sector-specific risks and vulnerabilities. Disasters are cross-cutting, so we need sectors to take up this, since the role of OPM is mainly coordination if we are to effectively manage disasters. Conclusion. Disaster risks are increasing in both frequency and magnitude that may affect the achievement of NDP 3 targets across programs. The budgeting and resource allocation processes need to consider strengthening the contingency planning process and decentralization of roles, responsibilities, and resources for disaster preparedness. Strong coordination arrangements for government and donor-controlled funds towards disaster risks and emergency management is necessary for strengthening contingency funding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Another round of applause. So that was the Permanent Secretary representing the Permanent Secretary Office of the Prime Minister. The next presentation, ladies and gentlemen, will be done by the Accountant General, Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, effectiveness of district contingency plans, and so I'm sure everybody is waiting to hear.
Yes,
You're
I know everybody.
You're a very rare person.
At least now you have seen me. So the Honorable Minister. Yeah, I'm always loud, so I will say the Honorable Minister, the Honorable Members of Parliament present, heads of missions, representatives of development partners, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, I'm delighted to be here. And when Julius sent me an invitation, I had to rethink, because some of us are always in our offices, always cracking numbers, always behind the systems. So I said, okay, Julius, I'll come this time to make the presentation, not on an accounts, but on the contingents. And then I also started thinking that I have been here, I'm the accounting officer of the contingencies fund, but I've never thought about the planning of contingents in the various departments. So I was actually, I'm confessing. So it's not that I'm confessing, because I keep releasing, I want accountability, but how do we budget for that contingency? So it actually occurred to me that it's something that we have really neglected and we should take on. So I think from up front, without necessarily trying to cut shortcuts, I'm saying that maybe there are certain things that we now need to do to be able to actualize the contingency planning and contingencies fund. For example, why don't we put in the law, as we request for those other certificates of gender and so on, why can't we put a requirement that we need a certificate of contingency, compliance to contingency planning for every budget that we receive? The other could be that we also need to think that for those areas that are prone to this kind of disasters, why don't we think of putting up permanent funds, even though a disaster doesn't occur this season, it might occur next season, so that we keep building up those kind of funds, other than waiting for the disaster to come, and then we run and we don't have funds. So those are the two things that I could think about off cuff. Now back to business, is that for me, I'm at the tail end of business. As I said, by law, I'm the accounting officer of the contingencies fund. So I manage the contingencies fund at the high level. Now, contingencies fund is established under Article 157 of the Constitution and operationalized under Section 26 of the PFMA 2015 as amended. As per the PFMA 2015, the fund is supposed to be replenished annually by an amount equivalent to 0.5%, that is 0.5% of the appropriated annual budget, excluding any supplementary budget of government of the previous year. I'll explain that as we go along. The objective of the contingencies fund is to enable government to secure resources required to mount an effective response to natural disasters without initiating unplanned supplementary budgets, which at times are funded through budget cuts, which pose significant risk to the credibility of the annual budget and execution of planned government activities. So the law is very clear, is that the contingencies fund, and this is the fight I've always been having at the Treasury. Everything sometimes comes, now it should be from the contingencies fund. No, the law is very clear about what should be funded from the contingencies fund. And this is under which it says natural disasters as described under Section 27, subsection 3 of the PFM Act 2015. And it's, I can quote here, a withdrawal from the contingencies fund shall be under the following circumstances: where a case of natural disaster causes severe human suffering or material, economic, or environmental damage, and which results in or is likely to result in the loss of essential services required to meet basic human needs, and which cannot be responded to within the available resources from the annual budget or other sources of funds, and creates a compelling need for funding that is in the public interest. So those are the circumstances under which we should draw money from the contingencies fund. So what is the procedure? So usually the procedure is that there is an appropriation, and that appropriation is of course backed up by law. But I want to tell you that the honorable members are here. You are not saying I'm reporting you. I really have very difficulties in accessing that what is prescribed in the law. And at times I have to hide and put the contingencies fund figure as the last, when in reality it should always be the first. But I also have to hide and say, if I put it there, it will be reallocated for other priorities. So I have to hide and put it as a last resort, which members of parliament, I think you should be able to support me and fund the contingencies fund as per law. That would be very great. The other issue, of course, is that under that, we had also tried to say that we should not subject the contingencies fund to what we call appropriation lapse. So that if for this financial year we have budgeted for 67 billion and we have not used the 67 billion, so the other fund should really become part of the fund and we can add on so that the fund keeps building. Because now the problem is that this fund is funded through an appropriation. And of course, you know what means funding through an appropriation. An appropriation, just to simplify, for those that do not work with us at the Treasury or who are not members of Parliament. So when we go for an appropriation, we have funding sources. Now those funding sources, we have our taxes that we collect, we have the non-tax that we collect, we have the loans that we borrow, both domestically and externally. And then we have grants. So you have those to balance up your budget. So you said, okay, my budget is 43 trillion, it will be financed 25 billion by tax, 5 billion non-tax, and the balance I will borrow. Now, when it comes to budget execution, now we start, because we are not like these other developed countries. When we go, sometimes I get real embarrassed when I go to see my colleagues. For them, they have the cash reserves are there. The cash reserves are there. And when they are going to execute a budget, you don't even talk about cash. It's not a problem. So now, when it comes to budget execution, I've talked about revenue, non-tax, loans, domestic and external. Now, the external take long to come. I take a long time to negotiate for, we take a long time to negotiate for those loans. The domestic ones, sometimes the markets become wild, and we cannot go to collect that money. So that means that as you are executing, you're having a deficit. As you're having a deficit. So when you have that deficit, now you have to then decide which activity is critical for government, which activity is not critical for government. And we are sometimes now have to debate and say, okay, the contingencies fund, we know do that, we need 30 billion, but we cannot afford the 30. We have to give you 15. So that is the challenge that we have. So we have to think of where we put monies and have it locked in there and know it is for disaster. So how do we withdraw money from the contingencies fund? The responsible accounting officer prepares a request. Now, all monies that are to be withdrawn from the contingencies fund have to be sanctioned by cabinet, have to be sanctioned by office of the Prime Minister. So even if a disaster is in health, or a disaster is where, it still has to be coordinated by the Office of the Prime Minister, because the Office of the Prime Minister is the leader of all government business. So a responsible accounting officer prepares a request for funds and presents a work plan for consideration and authorization by Cabinet through the Office of the Prime Minister. Once Cabinet has approved the request, the responsible accounting officer writes to the Minister of Finance requesting for funds to be disbursed as approved by Cabinet. All relevant documents, including the Cabinet extracts, are supposed to be attached. The Minister, in consultation with the Secretary to the Treasury, requests for a grant of credit from the Office of the Auditor General. and then the minister then issues for me a warrant to spend in accordance with the law. And the accountant general then advances the requested funds to the accounting officer through the payment system. Now, in some cases, we do give exemption because we think that once there is a disaster, then the operations don't become normal. But of course, we have the disadvantage that when the operations don't become normal, then the other things also set in. Then we have to again get into other issues. So, but under the contingencies fund, we give so many exemptions. We don't want, for example, don't advertise if you have farms that are nearby there to supply, let them supply, all those kind of things. So the accountant general may operate such accounts as may be deemed necessary for the contingencies fund, depending on the operations. Thereafter, the accounting officer is responsible for management of the funds, including reporting and accountability through the payment system. And usually, there is no commitment which is supposed to be made beyond the advance authorized. And the accounting officer is required to prepare and submit to accountant general an accountability report for the funds advanced to him within 60 days upon completion of the activity. Any unexpended balances are refunded to the contingencies fund immediately on completion of activity, and this is by 31st of July as per the law. The accountant general prepares and submits reports to the auditor general every year, using the accounting standards prescribed in the Treasury accounting instructions and the report format that we prescribe. The Auditor General then audits and submits a report to Parliament on the accounts of the contingencies fund. Then the Minister is also supposed to prepare a report by end of February and October of each financial year to Parliament. Now, this is how we have done. Since the enactment of the law, the first 2 years, we struggled to have anything on the contingencies fund, so we never had any monies advanced approved to us for and there was nothing released. So we started the release, I think, in the year 2019. That is when the first release came, and that is the operations. Next slide, where we have disbursed this money. As you can see, we have to food relief items for hunger-affected population to Office of the OPM, and that was 2018-19. We support Bududa mudslide victims, reallocation, construction, and food supplies. Then in 2019-2020, we had emergency relief items for Office of the OPM. We gave some to COVID food relief, OPM. We had desert locust control to Ministry of Agriculture. We had COVID to Ministry of Health. And we also sent money to the Chinese embassy for the one student's upkeep. 2020-21, we also had the food relief to OPM, support of flood victims to OPM, and also procurement of COVID vaccines, which we funded. 2021, there was drought towards drought and floods. That, I think, was the Kasese and Kasese and Karamoja. Then we did for the COVID testing at Entebbe Airport remodeling. We had the procurement of machines for Ministry of Health, ambulances and maintenance, tests, and so on and so forth. And the current one which we have done is the support to hunger victims in Karamoja. I think you can also see those pictures that they have done. And also we funded partly the resettlement of Bududa victims, the previous slide, the housing that are being done there. You can see the locust and the COVID center. So what are the emerging challenges? Already the PSA OPM has talked about that appropriation is less than what is provided for under the law. And we have always been arguing, you see, money can never be enough, but you have to have, let's follow what is in the law. Because the law had a purpose. That's why it was made into law. So let's try to see and be able to fund the contingencies fund as per the law. We, of course, have many competing requisitions, and therefore we cannot meet those requisitions because we do not have that funding. And then, of course, in some cases, we have had non-qualifying emergencies, which we have, as I said, is that what is for contingency is clearly defined under the law. And therefore, not everything that is emergent should be funded from the contingencies fund. We have had issues of late submission of accountabilities and the improper accountabilities, all those kind of things. And some of you have read the Auditor General's report on those. So, in conclusion, I want to say that the number of complex and protected disasters in Uganda is increasing due to climate change, national calamities, and other shocks. And for us as a country, we do not need to wait for those calamities. For example, now we are talking about the exploration of oil. I hope the Office of the Prime Minister, the technical staff, I'm not talking about my boss, the minister, the technical staff are here listening. So we should start thinking that don't wait about a calamity of oil spills to happen, because you know it would happen. You are already thinking about it. So let's start planning now. Let's start funding for it now. We can start slowly, so by the time that it comes, then we should be able to be prepared. As I said, risk management plan is key in mitigating the impact of disasters. Appropriation of funds to the contingencies fund as stipulated in the law will go a long way in supporting effective operationalization of the National Disaster Risk Management Plan. So with those few remarks, I want to end here. I thank you very much.
Give the Accountant General another round of applause. Lawrence, I must tell you, at one point the audience was so attentive. I could almost hear a pin drop on the carpet. That was so how you had the attention from this audience. And thank you so much. I think everybody was expecting to listen from you. And you know, you talked about the appropriation job. We have members of parliament here who I'm sure are allies. Honorable Yadugava Alex is here. Honorable Akamba Paul. I think also Dr. Atim Agnes Aper, yes, the woman member of parliament for Amolata. Thank you so much for finding time to come here. So let's have one more presentation that will take us to the break, to tea break, and that will be done by CS Bag. Effectiveness of district contingency plans in disaster risk management, a case study of Chegegwa and the Singiro districts.
I didn't receive a clap on that one. Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Very good. Accountant General, it's very hard to go after you. Yeah, that's how important your discussion was, long awaited. I am now going to narrow it down and give it the context of the local governments. I am going to pick out two local governments in particular, that's Singiro and Chegegwa. With these districts, we've been doing some work together with Oxfam, with support from the EUTF and our partners' joint efforts to save the environment, to see how this process has been working in the districts. So I have a very brief presentation that I want to bring to your attention that will give some context to the panel discussion that's going to follow. Okay, what I call Omotuawansi. What does he benefit from all this discussion? Okay, so my name is Micho Aineriona. I work as an economist with the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group, and I'm also the focal person for the humanitarian work within the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group. CSBAG is a coalition of about 100 member organizations that are keen on seeing how the public resources are allocated in mind of having the person down to benefit from all the discussions that the Accountant General has been saying. So like I said earlier, our policies and our laws are very keen, at least, and I want to thank the Minister for that. We've tried to strengthen our legal framework around the contingency planning. We have the provisions of the contingencies fund, we have a policy of 2011. In here, you see the framers of these policies had this in mind. For example, if you look at the next slide, if you look at our national policy for disaster of 2011, it requires all local governments to develop contingency plans. Okay. Check 1, 2. Okay, am I clearer? Yeah. Okay. So, like I was saying, our policy, the national policy for disaster preparedness of 2011, clearly stipulates that local governments should develop contingency plans, which should be updated annually. These are discussions we are going to be seeing, okay? The policy is very clear on this, to provide for coordinated management of the anticipated potential emergencies to address any needs that may come up. That's the policy, very clear. Is this done is the thing that we are going to now see. Then, to assess this effectiveness of this provision within the law, we thought it wise as CS-BAG to undertake an assessment of the two local governments I've mentioned to see how far are they implementing this. Do they have plans in place like the policy says, or any other districts like we're going to see? So, key findings, just to save time. So in terms of allocation, if you look at their, by the way, I want to admit that these two local governments have district contingency plans, and at the time of this assessment, both were updated, thanks to some of our partners like the Red Cross and all the other partners that are supporting in the Oxfam in this. I want to draw your attention to the management and coordination bit where most of the work of the contingency plan lies. If you see that, you will find that the management is what I highlighted in red, that in one of the local governments, Isingiro has tried to put something there, you know, in the management where most of the work of managing the district contingency plan lies. So the rest of the years, most of the allocations are to food, to water, to health, and maybe natural resources. So it tells you something about how the management is functioning and how they can work to cascade this down. So from this, I'll draw you to the observations that we see that I want to take note of. So we found that the funding in some of the interventions in the DCP was mainly by development partners, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on where you're looking at it from. Okay? Meaning that tomorrow, if they were to pull out, as a government, how would we stand? How would the districts function? We also found that there's no specific budget for the district contingency plans. If you look keenly through, you will not find specific. You'll find a few issues that I have mentioned up there, for example, in the management, a few allowances here and there, you know, that will be lacking. Another key finding that we saw was that whereas this DCP had mapped out all the interventions that they wanted to do, this had been done very clearly. We, however, found that the budgetary allocations, especially for those two financial years, was just around a few interventions of disaster. Yet these districts are very prone to a number of them, almost 15 hazards, if you're to look through. The other concerning finding was that whereas the DCP had mapped out specific critical interventions to DRM management, the DCP is very clear on some of the interventions according to the vulnerability. Okay? We found that still, especially now like for Isingiro, the funding wasn't commensurate to what they had discovered. It was just a bit of snippets here and there. Again, like I said, you see the link between the policy framework, the contingencies fund, and what is cascading down on ground. Okay? So just to highlight for you, in terms of adherence, for example, we picked out one of them to our plans, for example, our NDP3. So again, using the example of Isingiro, the NDP3 has particular areas of interest that they look at in terms of DRM. That's disaster risk management. One of them is operationalizing and enhancing disaster risk governance structures to manage the risk. They're keen about the governance, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? That to operationalize this, you have to have the management and the coordination done right. Okay? In terms of what was there, we saw some progress within the DCPs. Okay? We saw that they have in place a DDMC that tries to meet, not as regularly as we would want, because ideally they should have been meeting quarterly, as the policy states, but there's some will there. We also found out, sadly, that the political leaders had limited awareness. Again, this is the management, ladies and gentlemen, the people who actually pass the budgets that the Accountant General has been talking about at the district level. So we found, with the limited knowledge, how are they able to now pass some of these? So these were some of the concerning findings. The other key one was, of course, on the financing, disaster risk financing. We saw that as a district, there's some commitment they are making, though it's not deliberate when we asked some of them. A few of them have knowledge, maybe the natural resources officer, the planner, you know. Some of the others allocate these funds, but they don't know that they help addressing issues of drought, maybe famine, and the like. So in the district, we found that they had an approved work plan and budget, some of the specific interventions contributed to the DCP, but it wasn't very deliberate, unfortunately. So if you look at the case for the functionality, if you move to the next slide, we just assessed some components according to the policy, what the policy provides. That's the disaster management policy of 2011. In terms of the policy provides for these committees in terms of structure to be in place, and we assessed to see are these structures in place. One of them is the District Disaster Policy Committee, very key, and we found it was in place. In terms of functionality, unfortunately, it wasn't functional at the time of this assessment. The District Disaster Management Committee that I've mentioned about, we found it was in place, and there's some work still being done around this. This is a question that we can now ask for our colleague in Bududa, for example, is it functional? A discussion that we want to have here. The other very important one is around the emergency coordination within the districts. Unfortunately, the coordination currently is still at the central government. It hasn't yet been cascaded, but I am happy that in the plan that was launched recently, there's a plan to at least put it at the regional level, and this is something we are very happy about. As we go down to Omutwawansi, like I mentioned earlier, the sub-county was not functional and wasn't even there, okay? The village, of course not. We are now moving parish discussion. Can it be commensurate with what we are having in disaster discussion so that we can have this cascaded down? So that was the case for Isinjiro, pretty much the same for Chegego as well. I'll not go through that. But most importantly, that within the work of the DDMCs, what's coming through? What were they doing and what was being actualized? Okay? So in terms of creating the vulnerability assessments, the hazard and risk mapping, we saw that this had been done, like I said. There's some commitment by the district. There are some copies, of course, with support from the partners that are here. Then in terms of the plan, this was also in place at the time of the assessment. There were copies in place. Unfortunately, a number of the other interventions in here were not done, such as the data for the contingency plan. Some of this is not done annually, and you know this is a document that's supposed to help with the planning. The council budget proposals as well. These were not in line with what had been proposed, okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, what then are the challenges? What's causing all this, if we shall move to the challenges? We picked three main challenges. If you'll move to the next slide, please. So these are the key challenges. There were a number of them, but we're able to categorize and limit them to these. One of them, of course, was on the resources that I am happy the Accountant General has highlighted here. We saw that most of the interventions prioritized in the DCP are financed by development partners. Only a very small percentage comes from the districts themselves, okay? And the challenge with this is that the development partners' resources are often earmarked for particular interventions because they also want to achieve some objectives with their funding as well. So whereas the district has some interventions that they would want to meet, they would have to do them on the conditions of the partners, okay? The other very important one is that they were not updated annually, and we found that they lack an M&E plan. This is a plan that's meant to help see how are they implementing this. Very key, okay? The last one was on the capacity, ladies and gentlemen, especially amongst the political leaders that actually pass these budgets. If they are not aware of some of these intricacies, it will be hard for them to understand what's happening. So, what do we recommend then? We have a number of recommendations, but we've highlighted these critical ones that we think, if addressed, at least in the next planning period, we would have so much mileage in this area. So one of them, of course, is the legal framework, a law, that would put all this in operationalization, like the Accountant General has said. Right now, it's a few that have knowledge about this that make an effort to what? To put some funding for these interventions. They can do it, they can choose not to do it, and you won't hold them accountable, okay? The other one is, of course, operationalization of the DCPs, and this is through picking out a few key interventions in these plans and putting them in the annual budgets and work plans. That is the beginning point for us. The other one, of course, is like the Accountant General has mentioned here, is, of course, looking at operationalizing the contingencies fund as provided by the law. He has mentioned very candidly why he can't be able to do that fully, but at least it's one that would give us mileage, especially on how this can be accessed by those local governments that are at the forefront. Okay? The other one that's more sustainable is mainstreaming. DRR is not a standalone sector like you've noticed. It's one of the sectors that can cut across within agriculture, within health, within water, you know. So if this is put and the provision is done, maybe like a certificate of compliance to this, we will achieve a lot. The other one, of course, is the coordination and management. Ladies and gentlemen, without management support to push some of these things, it's very hard to achieve. We can speak here until management is brought on board within these districts to push this, be very key. And lastly, but definitely not least, is a monitoring framework, some sort of accountability, you know, that yes, I saw a number of people when the Accountant General was presenting, they were surprised of the monies that are actually getting in there. They were shocked, this money is actually moving here because there's no framework. Now imagine if that's at national level, what about at district level? So this is a discussion that we would want strengthened to see that this is actualized. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, we noticed that both districts, if you move to the next slide, please, we noticed that both districts, both local governments of Isinjiro and Chegegwa, have some fair level of awareness of the district contingency planning process, thanks to the efforts by some of our partners here. However, the actualization is the other bit that now we want to discuss and maybe find solutions to in this meeting. The other one, we found that the linkages between the district interventions and the DCPs were inadequate, that the district carry out their annual budgets and their plans, but if you look at the plans that they have, this is the contingency plans, you don't see a link of the two. So you wonder what is informing the other. So for sustainability, this is an area that we need to look to. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, for effective implementation of this contingency plan, especially at the district level, there's need to fully support and buy-in from both the political, I insist again, the political and the technical officers for this to be actualized. Thank you very much. For God and my country.
Thank you, Mitchell. Another round of applause for Mitchell. I've been advised to amend the program, not the constitution, the program. To amend the program so that we can handle this. Instead of going for break, we do the plenary, the panel discussion, and we'll do it at once. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to invite these panelists. Each one of them will be given time to speak to us on a particular question, and thereafter we're going to have a plenary. So, in case you agree with them or don't agree with them, that will be a time for us to debate. You'll put up your hand. If I know your name, I'll say your name. You'll ask a question to any panelist, or maybe agree or disagree with them. But should you decide to disagree, that's okay. It's the nature of debate. I only ask you to disagree with respect. So, these are our panelists. I'll be inviting them one by one, and as they come, please welcome them warmly. We have the DR focal person for Bududa District, Mr. Samson Natambwa. There's a step there. We have the Director, Disaster Risk Management, Uganda Red Cross Society, Dr. Brian Kanahe. May I invite the Chair, Uganda Parliamentary Forum on DR, the Honorable Alex Byarugawa. And once again, may I invite the Accountant General, Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, Lawrence Samakula. And last but not least, may I invite the Honorable Anyakun Esther, Minister of State for Relief, Disaster Preparedness and Refugees, Office of the Prime Minister. It's quite on the edge, Honorable Minister, the Chair. Okay. I'm very tall, I can't fall down. Okay. I needed that reassurance. Thank you so much. Okay, so let me begin with the Honorable Minister. In fact, as you were talking, and others, I was putting down some questions maybe that could be guiding. The President of the Republic of Uganda issued a directive in July 2021 to develop a comprehensive National Disaster Risk Management Plan and SOPs for Uganda. The question is, what steps has the government undertaken to ensure the plan is actually actualized in reducing vulnerabilities at all levels.
First of all, I want to say thank you for
Microphone.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank you for the question. Yeah, it's true. On the 5th of July, I think I was just like 1 week after I was appointed, 1 or 2 weeks after I was appointed. His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Uganda, gave us a directive to formulate a national disaster risk management plan. And I actually took lead in a consultative position where the UN family, especially UNDP, helped us to take this process. So what happened, we had the plan submitted to, approved by Cabinet. That was on the 11th of July, 2022. It took us some time from July 2021 to July 22. So we had it approved by Cabinet. And then in September, this plan was also submitted to Parliament. But before we submitted it to Parliament, we had a very big donor conference, because it's a 10-year plan. It is from 2022 to 2023. So we have the short term, mid-term, and long term. And you look at it, it has a lot of money and a lot of activities, of which I want to thank the team that have been working with, that have ensured that this plan should have been done way back, like yesterday, but now we are able to work on it. And the limp that we have, of course, definitely is the issue of the bill, which we know we are working on it to be able to operationalize the law. And I thank my brother, the Accountant General, that as the plan comes out, at least the law is also on its way, and we'll be able to be on the same page. But so it was also taken to Parliament, and it was approved by Parliament of Uganda. So right now we are in the process of including it in our budget framework paper, so that it is being part of the budget for the department. So it is ongoing, but we know it's a big thing, but I still request like some activities that we know cannot be achievable within the short term and also within the mid-term. But we know our partners are here and our friends are here. They will always be able to take up what they feel they can support us in the National Development Disaster Risk Management Plan. We have the pledge from World Bank, we have a pledge from the UN to support the plan, and also we have the pledge from other partners like EU and so forth to be able to support it, to be implemented.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. And I'll have another question for you, but maybe now that you talked about the Accountant General, who is with us here. You know, Section 26 of the Public Finance Management Act 2015, as amended, establishes a contingency fund. How has that fund contributed to supporting disaster risk management since its enactment at law?
If I knew that that was the question coming, then I would not have made the presentation. But, but as you saw in my presentation, that is, since the enactment of the Act of 2015, Parliament, I don't have to blame them, but I have to thank them also that they have tried to at least allocate some funds to this contingencies fund. We had the issues, of course, in the first year, the 15, 16, 16, 17, but at least in 18, 19, and to date, they have been appropriating a minimum of about 67 billion shillings per annum to be able to respond to disaster. So you have seen from my report there, where we have intervened in Bududa, in Karamoja, in Kasese, in Windbujo, in locusts when they came in, COVID, there was a COVID response. So all these have been done with the help of funds from the contingencies fund.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. And I just maybe keep coming this side so that I don't keep this gentleman also waiting for long. So, the Honorable Alex Biarukawa, you're the chair of Uganda Parliamentary Forum on DR.
And so investing in disaster risk management can help mitigate impact, save resources, and significantly contribute to the national development process. What measures has the Parliament put in place to address the current funding challenges towards this disaster risk management?
Colleagues, and of course the organizers of this workshop, first of all I want to thank them, all of you, for having invited us as Parliament. And it's also a pleasure to have my brother, yes, Honorable Semakura, next to me. But most of all, I want to thank our Minister for all the efforts that she has been undertaking to ensure that this comes to reality. One, Mr. Semakura, much as I wouldn't want to disagree with you, but Parliament, thank you for saying Parliament has been doing something. Yes, thank you. But there's a big problem in finance, honestly. Colleagues, whereas we put in place, we enacted the law. It's clear. Way back in 2015, let nobody lie to you. In 2016, 2017, we received zero money on that account. 2017, 2018, there was zero money on that account. 2018, 2019, there was zero money released on that. Maybe some...
I thought you had a job of appropriation.
Negligible. That's what I'm saying. We do appropriate, thank you, Honorable Doctor. We do appropriate. But then at the end of the day, well...
You're overruled by the ministry?
By the executive, Semakura and Company Limited. Yeah, so sometimes our hands, honorable colleagues, are tied. It's just very unfortunate. I can go on and on and on and tell you that even in the other years, for following financial years, Honorable, my brother, Mr. Semakura, knows very well that out of the 62 billion supposed money to be released, I think one time we received about 24, something like that, very little. The rest was not released. So there is that problem. You all know very well that Parliament is doing its very, very, very best. Like last time, I think I met most of you when you were in the other big hotel also. I talked about issues, issues that we have tried to undertake as Parliament. We've enacted laws. These laws we are talking about. It's one of our cardinal responsibilities to enact laws, to legislate, to oversee. We oversee the actions of Semakura and the group. I mean government. I'm only using him as a friend, honestly. No ill intentions at all, meant at all whatsoever, because I know him very well. So, but sometimes when we come out with a report, tell these people, Honorable Semakula, how many times do you bring back the Treasury Memorandum of Parliament? Yet the law says every end of year, every year. Do you do that? They don't. So we are sometimes our hands are tied. But all that we can do as Parliament is to insist. You talked of, yes, I do agree that sometimes we do interrupt and interfere with government programs and arrangements. You have allocated or you have identified that we should allocate maybe a certain amount of money. It comes to appropriate. Parliament deducts some of the money. Yes, I want to agree with you. Sometimes it does that. Because when we look back at what we've done, we realize that after all, even if you leave it there, it will not be released. So why don't you put it in other key result areas like health, like agriculture? That's what I think happens. I'm only thinking aloud because I don't sit on budget. Don't look at me with a bad eye because of that. Next time I come for a favor, please kindly. Then
on that very issue, because I think Ugandans want to know, if you have a constitutional role of appropriation, of making laws and oversight, why can't you be allowed to do that part? How can you appropriate at the end of the day what your appropriation is just disregarded? I don't get it.
That is the drama we can all talk about. I don't know anyway. So anyway, we also know that Parliament, unfortunately, I see my colleagues here, but we get a lot of turnover. Like me, maybe my other colleagues, Christine and others, we are very, very, very well informed about these subject matters, the contingency issues. We struggle to ensure that it is in place. My honorable minister, we know all this, but I can assure you when it comes to turnover, 3/4 of my people never come back. So, like now, we have to go back to sensitize the new members of parliament about the essence of contingency funds. Contingency funding. They don't know. Some may just, we're talking about, I had a hailstorm in my village, I want 10 iron sheets. No, we are not talking, we are talking about something bigger than that. We are talking about planning. We are talking about investing in something today to save more tomorrow. Some don't see it that way. So, civil society, come to our aid. When we get to you, like CESBAG, IOM, thank you very much for coming out. CESBAG, IOM, Oxfam, do not hesitate to support Parliament, I want to assure you. We need to know some of these issues. Even Honorable Semakura didn't know that actually there is a need for planning. He would only release some little money here and there. He did confess. So these are some of the issues that we think we can do as members of parliament to legislate, to oversee, and also to represent people and to ensure that they get value for the money, that the little money available, and ensure that their lives are not disrupted by future natural hazards. I call them natural hazards. Are they hazards or disasters? That one also need, everybody talks of natural disasters. Natural disasters, well, think about that again also. These are natural hazards. So there's also a problem that I think is coming up. Mainstreaming of these issues to do with the disasters. We do our utmost best to ensure that local government are empowered. We do not want over-reliance, like you gave us these two examples of Isinjiro and Chegegwa. Yes, the little work being done is actually by NGOs, the civil society organization. But the local person there, civil servant, doesn't know what it's all about, what we are all talking about. I saw a cow here, an assistant cow here from Isinjiro. If you asked him about all, it's like strange music in his ears. So I think it's important that we empower our local leaders, our local civil servants, our local actors, other than relying entirely on foreign support. It kills the innovation and invention. And I think that is something that we're also struggling to do, to ensure that most of the funding goes to the local governments so that they can plan from there, act from there, and emphasize more on contingency plans rather than on response only. I think that's all that I can. In the meantime, I thank you so much.
A round of applause to Honorable Garubera. The man is passionate about what he's doing. You can feel the passion in his voice, and sometimes the frustration as well. Dr. Brian Kanahi, you're from Uganda Red Cross Society. What are some of the critical challenges that need to be addressed to ensure these plans are fully operationalized in the district annual budgets as a sustainability measure? Mr. Kanahi, Dr. Kanahi.
Thank you. Thank you, moderator. Now, these contingency plannings, or the whole planning process that we are talking about today, is it is a tool that is aimed at sharing the burden of disasters across all actors at the district level and at the national level. So that's the first one, that although, yes, the government plays a lead coordination role, the burden is shared across all actors, and that we, as Ugandans, we need to make deliberate decisions to see to it that in a comprehensive manner we are able to plan, to anticipate, plan, and respond effectively to these disasters. Now, two, these contingency plans need to be multi-hazard in nature, multi-hazard in a way that something nowadays we are calling planetary health approach, where we are having disasters having new phases. First it starts as a flood, Then, because the water is going to wash away sanitation facilities, risk of cholera comes in. But remember, that's also a time when mosquitoes are going to have fun, and then we're going to have malaria. But at the same time, our animals, our goats, hens, they are going to be washed away. There is going to be higher chances of having Newcastle disease or coccidiosis. So we need to have this in place in that approach. So we shouldn't, our contingency plans must be multi-hazard in nature. So for sustainability, that is already the planning process. Now, most importantly, and this is what we see on a day-to-day basis, having a document in place must have triggers, mutually agreed upon triggers. And already the government of Uganda has, with support from UNDP, came up with the National Risk and Vulnerability Atlas, which states which disasters, which districts are prone to which hazards, potentially turning into disasters. So for all of us to know and to use that document, it helps us to make a case for what are those key anticipated disasters in which period of the year, where and how that can be adjusted. But most also importantly is, many times we respond. Yes, you prepare, you respond. But how do we help communities to be able to anticipate and prepare by themselves and respond by themselves without external support? That we can, that's the essence of funding. But funding for what? And there is now, we are talking of concepts, general concepts that help districts or communities to be able to generate their own money in a way that can be reinvested back for preparedness. And that's what many times we call bankable nature solutions. So without that money, the document will be there and we can always be crying and telling government and going back to the donors, let's have the money, but we need sustainable funding at the local level. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Brian. A round of applause to him. We have a gentleman who has been at the front line of responding to disasters from Bududa district. And so Samson Natsibwa from Bududa, I can imagine there are some challenges you have faced in managing these disasters in your region. What are they? What is your story and how can they be handled?
Thank you very much, moderator, honorable minister and the panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, I want first to concede all what has been said in the House, more so by the panelists, for those that actually hosts all those things which have been said. Now, the issue of challenges, just adding on what has been said, the very first one is incapacitation. Districts are seriously lacking capacity in handling and managing most of these things to do with the disasters. First of all, to begin with the human kind of capacity I'm talking about, the technical bit of it, we're not bad off. And therefore I want to take this opportunity to thank the Office of the Prime Minister, to thank the government of Uganda, through the Office of the Prime Minister, and all the partners I'm seeing here. They have been serious on the ground, technically in Budoda, on the technical bit of it, we don't suffer incapacity. We're going to suffer something else. But like the Honorable Minister said here, and the Honorable Member of Parliament, it is the political wing. In Budoda District Council, last time we had around 32 councillors. But those who managed to come back were only 5. And now the council has 52, meaning that we need to do a lot of capacity building to that team, because it supports everything else we do. Another one issue is the issue, of course, we've been talking about contingency planning. I can also say, with the support of the Office of the Prime Minister again, and Uganda Red Cross here, I have what I can say, I think outdated contingency plan, because it's 3 years ago, never executed. But now the challenge here was resources. We made the contingency plan, we had it, but we never executed anything from it independently Whatever we did, like it has been already here said, we do certain things in departments in our normal planning and our normal execution of activities, even without knowing some of them are directly we are handling issues of disaster risk reduction. That has been a challenge. And that is where we have hit a snag, Mr. Moderator, and it's a very, very big challenge. So without specific funding, we have been limited. Until today, if I talk about the capacity building, I can also report the Office of the Prime Minister is even currently today, up to tomorrow, we are undergoing a TOT training in Mount Elgon, in Bali City, and tomorrow we are going to come up with the action plans on how we are going to do the rest, especially now passing over or also going to train the structures at the sub-counties. This time parish model, we also need to look at some structures at the parish up to the village. So I think the capacity building is ongoing. But the incapacity here we're talking about, what we're lacking are resources to translate anything. Whenever anything happens, we wait on to the Office of the Prime Minister, and we make so many calls to the commissioner here, day and night. Until they are on the ground, we tend not to move. I submit.
Thank you very much, Samson. A round of applause. There was a time when there was a landslide in Bududa, and I remember the ministry, the OPM, dispatched heavy-duty graders to go and move the soil there. But when they reached there, they also got stuck. And for some time, the graders were on the mountain. I wonder whether they eventually...
In 2010, we had, I think, the worst slope failure in the mountains there. And the place is seriously inaccessible, hard to reach. These heavy earth movers were airlifted to the scene, but the airlifter never came back.
So they are still there?
They are still there today. They are still there. It never came back.
That's true.
Can you imagine? Those are over 12 years.
In 2010, heavy-duty graders airlifted to Bududa to move soil. And for 12 years, the trucks, I hope they are still there, the graders are still stuck on the mountain.
They work
because the aircraft to pick them up never returned. It's a sad story of Uganda. Anyway, the spare parts, okay, I don't know, but they are still there. Okay, I think now I want to open the discussion to the audience. You put up your hand. We have the Honorable Minister, we have the Accountant General, the Red Cross and the district. Who is going first? What questions do you have? And we have people online as well. So if you have someone online ready, Mr. Mukunda, you have an issue?
Yes, just I think the first.
Can somebody please?
Yes, it's quick for the accountant general. If you could probably try to distinguish, because there is a gray line between supplementary budgeting and the contingency fund. I would be grateful if at some moment you could be able to really give some highlight about that, because it is very easy actually to eat on contingency fund to deal with supplementary budgets. Thank you.
Okay. Lawrence, go for it, sir.
It's not very easy to do that. And that's why I keep saying that. I saw.
May I suggest we have 2 bottles of the sanitizer, one here and one there.
Okay, so what I'm saying is that
keep sanitizing as we exchange them.
there is a difference between the supplementary and the contingency fund. And as I said, that the contingency fund is very clear. The criteria how to access the contingency fund is very clear. And I've had the quarrels, if I can say, quarrels, not real quarrels, but quarrels where people come and say, no, you see, now you cannot provide this supplementary, let's go to the contingency fund. No, the two are very different. The supplementary, you are supplementing an activity that you had an activity, but now what you had budgeted became less. So you are supplementing it. That's why it's called a supplementary budget. But the contingency is very clear to cater for natural disasters. And I've been very clear on that. That's accounting officer. Unless when I'm not an accounting officer, they can change. But for us, we are clear. And the contingencies fund goes through a process. As I said, the Office of the Prime Minister they go to cabinet with the relevant entity, and the cabinet pronounces itself, and based on that, we can then do a release. But the supplementary, you can then write to the ST. If he thinks that he still has flexibility to add to you, then you can add. If the flexibility is not there, then it goes back to Parliament to ask Parliament to allow him to supplement you.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to take about 4 or 5 questions so that they can respond at once. I have a lady in yellow. Is it yellow? And then yes, sir. And I can see another hand there. Let's take about 5.
Thank you so much. I am Chetuma Rebecca, and I would want my question goes to the minister. Could you give us an engendered lens of how the fund supports the women and the men, because these disasters affect men and women differently?
Thank you, Rebecca. There's a hand at the back.
You see your presentation. Do you need this one? You can take it. Madam Chibagayo. At your apartment.
Thank you very much. I'm working first in charge of Okeke from Uganda National Meteorological Authority. I would like to thank the organizers of this platform, the dialogue, and then even I would thank the members of parliament and government entirely in supporting meteorology, especially in terms of some equipment. But however, we still have gaps, and I would make an appeal that these gaps be addressed. Since we are talking about contingencies, and contingencies about emergencies, and how best to respond. And I would get back to the point where our moderator, Kamara, was talking about graders getting stuck. In terms of operations in meteorology, meteorology gives technical advice. And we have already highlighted that most of the disaster, the hazards which degenerate into disasters in this country are driven by meteorological hazards. Now, one of the gaps, we have been talking how best to respond, how best OPM to respond, especially in the rapid onset hazards. I will give an example: floods, and then landslides, and perhaps mudslides. We need an equipment, despite the fact that government has provided with meteorology, with radars. But the gap which is still there is on response. And normally when OPM responds to rapid onset hazard, that gap is still pending. One of them is that we need mobile equipment where meteorologists sit on that equipment. It is a mobile studio. Most countries have that in disaster response. We link to our operations and link on the response teams where the meteorologists are part of the response teams. One of the things which we might face in the future if we don't address that, the response teams will become secondary disasters. And this has been happening. So what we need...
The authority also wants to do the response work.
Not the response, to provide information to avoid that is mitigation for information. Because the teams you send there, if the rains continue, assuming that they are heavy rains, and one of the examples you cited that the graders got stuck there. In our operation, we normally advise, even this is what we have been advising construction companies, that as long as the rains are on, never send heavy equipment there because they will get stuck there. It will be no work done. So that's the role of meteorology, to provide information and prevent other secondary disasters occurring. I will give you an example. You have sent the teams to Mount Elgon, and the rains are heavy, pounding. No one is providing them information. All of them can be washed even by either mudslides or even floods, because that's the role of meteorology, to provide information for response, for the safety of life of the teams who are there. So what we need mobile equipment always on response for rapid onset disasters, and we still have a gap in that. And that is what we would need, especially in our contingency planning. Thank you very much.
Okay, let me take 2 or 3, then the center will respond.
Yes, good morning to you all once again. My name is Stella Lambuja Sengino. I come from World Food Program. I'm very happy to see the Accountant General because I've never seen him, but I used to hear about him. I have one question. We've been, okay, not a question, but I want to know if, for instance, when we talk about the contingency fund, is it allowable for it to cater for anticipation, for preparedness and readiness? Because repeatedly we get some answers that does not allow for preparedness. The disaster has to actually first happen and then you respond. And literature tells us that you're able to reduce the cost of recovery if you acted early, based on data, objective data that you're able to get. We know, for instance, that some of these disasters will happen in Bududa, in Kasese. We also know that drought is a permanent feature in Karamoja. We are able to tell that indeed this year we will have a drought. But when we go and ask, for instance, that can the contingency fund, for instance, be allocated to districts that face these droughts before they actually face the drought or the flood, can this happen? Because we know that indeed we are able to save. And probably that fund would work more and be spread out more if, for instance, you're able to save back and cut back on some costs in responding to a flood situation when it has actually occurred. So it would spread out to more districts and would have more districts accessing this fund. So can we get maybe from the horse's mouth, if there are provisions to probably, how do you call it, quite to modify the act, what do they call it, like amend the act to take care of these provisions?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. These two, and please, if you can make your questions precise and concise.
Thank you very much, Moran, to the panelists. My name is Francis Iwa. From Kafomi. Kafomi is an NGO that works in the humanitarian sector, also shares the humanitarian platform for local national organizations. I really want to thank the entire panelists. And I'm very happy that the Honourable Minister has indicated that the progress for the bill is really moving very well. And I really hope that the lamentations by our Member of Parliament and also Bududa about the high turnover, we begin, because the critical thing here is knowledge. I hope that disaster issues will become part of our DNA from childhood, so that we will not say that members of Parliament don't have the knowledge, or even at the council level, because all of us as the people, if we do not, a stitch in time saves 9. If we do not appreciate that, we're just preparing a crisis. The resources that our Accountant General talked about, I'm really happy, like everybody else, that you broke the numbers down. What I did not get, and I really hope that should come out, was in terms of percentage, given the crisis that a disaster is, and the fund that there is. I know there were numbers you put up, they look big in millions, but in relation to the need and what is available, how is it addressed? Because that will, I think, bring out the issue of the gap. Then I want to come to what we as CSOs do in terms of resource mobilization. You made a very good point. Tax. Very good. But there's an element that we, the civil society organization, use. We call it appeal. His Excellency made the task force on COVID. There was a fund, and I think there was a Rotarian called Emmanuel Katombre who was the chair. That is a process for resource mobilization beyond what he listed. It can be crowdfunding, so raising small monies. That is where also the private sector can come in, but if the triggers are known, for example, the threshold, what overwhelms a district, what overwhelms the country, will make us then make an appeal externally, just like we appeal. That, for me, would be the beginning of supplementing what you said, locked fund. I liked that. Can we talk about a humanitarian pooled fund that civil society organizations can be part of so that we begin to call us partners? Because I think when you say partners, government often excludes, civil society organizations as partners, but we can actually raise that so that in terms of a stitching time saving 9, the contingency fund is our starting point so that we can avoid the crisis before. But let us then go out and look at all other resource mobilization avenues. You have a big, big, big base of civil society organizations. Trust is an issue here, because once you raise, you use your account, you enhance trust. And for us, for me, that is really where the starting point is.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Yes, I'll give him a microphone, then we shall have the panel respond. Just reclaim you.
Thank you very much. My name is David Nangos again, and I work for National Union of Disabled Persons of Uganda, NUDIP, which is an umbrella organization for all disability categories in this country. I first would like to make a correction that in Kasese, Ududa, and Isingiro, we have the periodic meetings of the district disaster management committees. And these have been periodically supported by NUDIP. They meet frequently. My chairperson, DDMC from Isingiro, is there. My chairperson, DDMC Ududa, is there. And the one for Kasese, I think, is not here. So these have been meeting frequently, and is one of the interventions that I wanted to highlight in this meeting. The Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction talks of multi-sectoral collaborations. And we as partners in the private sector have embraced this. I have listened to the challenges that have been noted in this meeting, but I must note that we as partners in an effort to contribute to disaster risk reduction, we are facing a number of challenges. Working with partners that are here at the national and at the district levels. We have a challenge to do with personal interests. For example, that is one thing. In a certain district, which has taken me 2 years to support in the review of the contingency plan, this has not happened. Even when I have been having resources, I'm the main man who has been supporting all this. I'm telling you, I know what I'm talking about. And then the other thing relates to negative attitude. We need to put all this attitude aside and serve our people. I am glad that my chairperson, DDMC Ududa, was in position to accept, to co-opt the representative of persons with abilities on the District Disaster Management Committee. And so he renewed his friendship with me. But I tell you, it took some time to convince him. Sir, I am able to talk about that because you did a tremendous achievement. We have a challenge to do with data disaggregation. The stakeholder group of persons with disabilities, which I represent here today, will continue to struggle with the disability disaggregated data. When we are reporting about the extent to which disasters have impacted on the community, on persons with disabilities in the community, we are not bringing out the picture to highlight the extent to which my stakeholder group has been affected. And that poses a critical challenge. I want to think in this way for my people that I represent and for the people that I work for. We need to have specific actions. And for my people, targeting persons with disabilities in response, mitigation, and preparedness. Because the Sendai framework tells us that my stakeholder group suffers 4 times as compared to those without disabilities. That is going to be the key. Then let's also put aside the personal interest. Let's try to avoid negative attitude. And moderator, I'm happy to report that in the area of incapacitation, for the 3 districts, Bududa, Kasese, and Isinjiro, in the area of disability inclusion and disaster risk reduction, colleagues, I want to note to you that we have trained these districts on how to respond to disasters in the perspective of disability. Thank you.
Okay, please, the microphone and
Thank you very much. I had one question, and it was about the lens, the gender lens in our department or in refugee response. First of all, I want to let you all know that gender issues are a cross-cutting issue as far as all government activities are concerned. When it reaches to beneficiary identification, we give women first priority. Because we know very well when the disaster strikes, the man will take off, but the woman will ensure she stays there to rescue her children. She will never leave the place. That's why you find so many women die than men. For him, as soon as the door opens, or he kicks the door, he takes off. It doesn't come back, but the woman will make sure she ties this one on her back. So in terms of beneficiary identification,
serious indictment on us.
I must say this, because every time I go to a place and they are dead, many of them are women. I went to Kisoro and there was this mudslide of around 6 people died, but it was only one was a man. And I was asking, where were you when you were women and I died? That means they took off. So then we have issues of mitigation. Women are first actors. I should say, sincerely speaking, when we are passing messages, information that leave Bududa, it's coming, they will be the first. When you go to a church and a school, you'll find the women there and children, and I think the counselor is my witness. So then we also run very fast to make sure that we take food and relief for them when they're in school. That's when you realize that women really take this very seriously and we involve them. Also in training, our department has been involving women right away from the DDMCs, and also at local level. I know the department has been doing that. At the emergency response, we make sure we look at when we are doing evacuation, we do separation. That's what they train even the DDMCs. They separate women and children, men and women, and also those ones who are lactating. At least the school, if they are going to a church, there is a way they create space at least to ensure that they are separated. Just as the way we are doing it with the refugees. I think we are a little bit recognizing that. But before I give out the microphone to my friend, the most wanted man in this room, I want to request all the IPs, the implementing partners, we need we should seek guidance, especially if you get funding from a donor. You need to seek guidance from the department. Where should we go? Because I've realized since I've been in this ministry, there's some people who are doing the same work, same activities, same implementation in the same district, same location. So now, I'll give an example. The training of the district disaster management committees, UNDP is doing it. OPM is also getting from department money to do that. Partners are doing it. So you see, you realize that the same group of people are being trained, and so when we seek guidance on what we should do, I want to thank European Union. By then it was Jody who was there. When they got some funding previously, they called me and they asked me, we have some money for some funding for disaster. Where should we go? I told them go to Elgon. Because I already know there was another funder who had consulted me, and I told them to go to Renzori. So I can't say all organizations should go to Elgon because they come from the east. No, we need to really balance these things, and we make sure and also the reporting mechanism. Probably the department of under the office of the Prime Minister should streamline the way we are reporting, so that we know that this is what has been done, this is what has been achieved. In Kasese, this is what this organization is doing. But we are scattered everywhere, doing almost the same thing, and we don't feel that. Then whenever there's a disaster, they say government is doing nothing. yet we are really coordinating all these partners and departments under the Office of the Prime Minister. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Lawrence.
Yeah, mine I think were about two questions. The first one, the first one was on the issue of funding, that why can't we use these funds to do preparatory activities? I want to say that for us at the end tail or at the I've been discussing with my boss here. I hope you will not use my boss,
my friend,
and a friend. So I hope you want to use it when I go to Parliament to say you give us the plan. But we are saying that I think we should rethink of how we do funding for the contingencies fund. And this is something that I also had highlighted, that let's create a fund that is not tied to appropriation, so that we know that there is a fund, and this fund responds to disaster, and we keep funding it every year, every periodic, and so on and so forth. I think that's what most countries do, and I think that's something that we need to agree with the MPs and see how to amend the law and be able to accommodate that. That would be much more easier for us, because now, as he says, when we take, you say, I need about 120 billion for the contingency, then they say, no, we are already lacking a health center here. So the trade-off, you can see. Say, are we sure that the disaster will be up to 120? They say no. So let's say have a fund that is very independent of the appropriation, and that would be much more meaningful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Question,
an independent fund is very good. I hope it doesn't follow the main the track of the road fund. We created the road fund and
you still are tied it to appropriation. So
yeah, and we tied it to appropriation, so it became almost not what we had intended to do really. And he would agree with me, and even the Honourable Minister really knows this. So I hope if we come out with that amendment, and I'm sure the Honourable Minister will look into it, and we always work together with her, we should be able to come up with that kind of amendment. So that if it is to become a real fund, then it becomes a real fund. We put their money, even the private sector puts their money rather, the private sector, the CSOs, the NGOs, and other good-hearted donors put their money for, especially for preparedness and, of course, response where necessary, where need be. So I have come up with just a few take-home may be that one, we need to ensure, we as members of parliament, commit to ensure that we enact this DRM law as soon as possible. Madam, honestly, we've been begging, and you're a very fast person, and I know. Let's do it. Let's not be forced to move a private member's bill.
We have started.
And I think this is where IOM, Oxfam, and Red Cross should come in to come. When we call upon you to come and assist our members of parliament to take us through some of these nitty-gritties of this law, please kindly come to our rescue. We are more than willing to work with you. I know, of course, finance is hard pressed. They don't have money enough, really. You know that. He may not tell you. Even me, I will not tell you. But I think we are a little bit hard pressed. So if you people can also come in to assist, to give a hand, we'll be more than happy to to ensure that we put in place this law as soon as we possibly can make it. Number two, we also commit to ensure that the Minister of Finance, even the little available, honestly, Minister of Finance should be made to fully operationalize this fund. Fully operationalize this fund. And this is where I think the Honorable Minister should come out very strongly. Come out strongly even to Parliament. Tell Parliament of what is happening on this fund. If they are not operationalizing it, we need to know some of those sordid details so that we can come to. Other than talking about it, we talked about it the other day, talking about it today, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Then the full operationalization just becomes a pipe dream. We don't want that one anymore. I think we want to commit to that. And honorable colleagues, members of Parliament, I think we have taken note of this one. Those of you who are on especially Budget Committee, and some of us who are on National Economy and others, please, let's put it as part of our commitment. And number three, we want also to ensure that local governments, local communities are empowered. I did mention it lightly, but it's so critical. We need to empower these local communities, local governments. Most of these funds should actually be directed there. Even it will cause us is accountability. I think we should also think about that, not necessarily through the Prime Minister's office only. If you know there is a Bududa has a problem, what interventions have we made, for instance? We should not only look at responses only. Part of Mount Elgon is in Kenya. How come the other part of Kenya does not have have similar disasters like we have on the same stretch of a mountain? Why do we have regular, frequent floods in Iteso, yet we can make use of these funds to construct massive water collection centers in form of dams, huge dams. One time, Teso, half of Teso as a whole, a third of Teso was underwater. After 3 months, they had terrible drought and famine almost. You know this. But supposing we also looked at it, think about out of the box. And this is what we should be talking about. Think outside the box. Get this much money, construct huge dams in Teso and other related areas, and maybe save a lot of water that otherwise would be causing a lot of flooding and chaos to the communities, and save it for future use by these people. 3 months down the road, there was a huge drought. You all know this, and it's a frequent feature in our lives, in what we are going through. The same with the Kasese, this river Nyamwamba. I remember, predictably, I think June, July, May and June, you can be sure there will be a what? a terrible flood, mudslides, loss of lives along those river beds. So why don't we prepare? What happened to Mount Rwenzori? What happened? Maybe there is a lot of deforestation. People were saying that there some demon of sorts had been annoyed that some Watoro had visited without whatever, and hence those floods and terrible rains and floods, mudslides and what have you. So I think we need to organize, to think outside the box and start being to act a little bit earlier than we have hitherto been doing. Finally, the issue of early warning. I am happy. When you talk of early warning, I have not heard anybody saying our early warning systems are so fake. I'm so happy. The minister, the participants, they have all said, yes, we are currently having first-class early warning data. Data is given in time. The information is reliable, usable, and comes in time. This was a deliberate move by Parliament. We pumped in a lot of money in that other area, Uganda National Meteorological Authority, something like that.
Yes.
A lot of money, and more is even being pumped into it. But I don't know whether they also want to merge it with the others.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Are you serious? It's a pity, but this is all that we are talking about. Honestly, they were doing a very good job, and this is something that we should be thankful to. So those are some of the issues that Parliament has been looking at, and we commit ourselves to continuously do it the same with your support. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Garukaba. There are not particular questions to you, but maybe, but I think there was to you. And then I have honorable members of Parliament here, who have been joined also by Honorable Kaya Christian, woman MP for Kibo.
Thank you very much. Briefly, let me begin with this one, Honorable Unoma. I think this issue is very serious. I give a testimony, Honorable Minister. You know, last year there was a drone being flown over Mount Elgon, I think in the national park. It crashed because a drone. Because the weather was bad, it was flown, it crashed. We never found it to date. So I think his point of having this mobile weather issues is key. Secondly, Honorable Member have talked about the Kenyan side of the Mount Elgon being not suffering the way we're suffering. The issue here is policy, implementation and enforcement. On our side here, the policies are here, but implementation and enforcement is the challenge.
And probably could be the best policies.
To that fact, I was thinking of a proposal. As we come up with a bill, let's also have an institution for enforcement. If it means disaster risk management, enforcement police, we better have it. Like in Bududa, my community is very defiant.
Yeah.
Give them the information, tell them to move, they will not move.
They were moved and they came back.
Some of them died. Another last one thing here is, I respect the police very much. David from Nudipo was saying he had some hard time with me when he wanted me to include a member of disability or DDMC. I said, what does the policy say? They didn't until we had to run some good length.
Recording in progress.
Somehow. So those are the few things I wanted to make a mention on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Samson. Let me get some questions or comments or information from this side, and that will be the last, second last group of questions. Yes. This is the Honorable Doctor here.
Thank you very much. Dr. Agnes, a team affair, woman member of Parliament at Molata District, I'm a member of Budget Committee, and the Deputy Chair of Agriculture. And I come from Molata, which you are aware is in the middle of Lake Kyoga and Lake Panea. So we're a disaster-prone district. If there is any small rain, the rivers get annoyed and it floods. And any little sunshine, we have droughts. So we are there and we appreciate your work. And thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for always coming to my rescue. I just have two comments. One is on the comment that our Accountant General brought about appropriation. And the idea that I think one of the presenters said that members of Parliament may not have the knowledge of disaster. But I want to clear that members of Parliament are representatives of the people who are affected by this disaster. We may not know the technical bit of it, but we are the first call, even if it is at night. They will always call us and let us know what is happening. So we are aware and we are your allies. Our biggest problem is actually the implementation and the enforcement of what we approved or appropriate at Parliament. And the last speaker was talking about having plans and implementation. I want to inform you that as a country, we have now moved away from having plans and not implementing to having a budget and not releasing the money. And that is a problem. There we are now stuck. At least plans, you can talk about it, But where we've gone ahead as members of parliament and we appropriate money and the money is not released and there is no explanation to that effect, it really hurts. And I think there was an issue in that context of supplementary versus contingency funds. And when the Accountant General was presenting, I saw where I think this financial year some money was also released. And I remember in budget committee, we also appropriated, I think, a supplementary budget to Karamoja disaster. And I'm aware up to now, very little money of that appropriation was actually released. So I think, and I think our Accountant General represents Ministry of Finance here. I think we need to organize ourselves as government and we speak one language, so that we don't confuse the country that, oh, parliament is not appropriating, oh, there is no money for disaster. I think we need to come with one message and we speak that same language to our people, so that we know where the problem is and then we sort it together as a country and as leaders. And then the issue of budgeting, I think as we sit on some of these platforms, some of us may not be there, but we should also be cognizant that budget proposals are brought by the executive. And as parliament, we work within that proposal and advise that maybe we remove from this and take it there. And when we come with a law that let us appropriate 0.5 to this particular item, it really comes from the point that we understand what these issues are. But if we do that and for 3 years money is not appropriated, where is the problem? Where is the problem? And if there is really no money, as we always say, how come that we are able to appropriate others? Because a disaster is, there is no compromise. When it is there, and it must be funded. So I think there is a problem somewhere. And that problem is my next issue, the planning and the prioritization. When a disaster strikes and there is a trip abroad, which one is more important to give money? Going abroad for a meeting or running to Bududa to save lives? So I think the issue of planning, prioritizing, and there's some selfishness that as leaders we are beginning to groom in this country need to be addressed. Because for me, the issue of disaster is like somebody has died, for heaven's sake. You don't need to actually even negotiate and expect, people to even listen and understand. I think we need to go beyond that. And I thank Accountant General for really accepting that there has not been any plan. And I want to thank our minister that she has really been pushing, and we've really put her on the wall in Parliament that we are not going to continue running for things that we know. My colleague has just said, who does not know that in May, Kasese will have a problem? That in this month, Mbale landslide will be in Elgon. And in Amolatar, we even know the weeks and even the dates sometimes. We know when the water is coming, and we know when it will go back. Why can't we have a plan to how to prevent it and how to inform our people? And I think as members of parliament and all the development partners here, we are your ally. We know these issues. We know our challenges of financing, but I call upon all of us. It is a shared responsibility, even civil society. What plans for you do you have? Before we even blame government, what plans do we have? And what money do we have? Do we even know how much money is actually planned for where? So I think let's take it as a shared responsibility, and we do our part as leaders and all individual development partners that are involved in this particular issue. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Once again, Kaya Christina Chimoyo, Uganda District Member of Parliament, but also the Shadow Minister for Water and Environment. I belong to the Environment and Natural Resources Committee of Parliament, as well as the Climate Change Committee. And I also subscribe to the Disaster Risk Management Forum of Parliament. Yes, Honorable Alex is my chair. We have messages to all of us, but we have to first ask ourselves the nature of disasters induced by what? When I look at many of us here, we have been following up with climate-related disasters or hazards. And we are all agreeing that 80% of the disasters we are receiving in Uganda are climate-related. Now that is the condition, how do we plan? Because I remember when we had COVID, which is health-related, and there are many more health-related hazards that are almost coming, now that the water tables have increased, if you try to ascertain. And yet the practice of pit latrines is still ongoing, meaning that the disasters or hazards by health-related disasters are going to increase. We need to decide, what are we concentrating on? Is it climate-induced, health-induced? We need to come out clearly on that. But we need a plan, like my colleague has talked about, a plan of how we are going to manage. There are also salient features in the disasters these days that probably we may forget, but disasters that affect food production. And people are rendered hungry and die of famine. We are getting very ashamed as Uganda to have populations die of hunger. So issues of disasters related to hailstorm, strong winds, they have destroyed very many plantations, and also soil fertility. We are over-concentrating on flooding and drought. We need to stretch out on disasters that affect food production. Because if we do not, the other response, wherever I've been attending these meetings, I've always told them, and that is what I'm also requesting all of you. At least inform everybody that if we don't invest the $1, we shall spend $15. And in Uganda, really, do we have the $15? We do not have all that. So, we need to stress this, especially the food production side. I saw when we tried to give pressure to Ebola lockdown this week. People said what you gave them was sustaining them for 3 days. But the lockdown is not yet lifted. So issues of food must come into play, because really seeing somebody dying of food is dangerous. And then the issue of the bill. We are very happy when the minister brought the disaster management plan. But this is a cluster. We need the whole what? The bill. Bunch. This is just a cluster. We feel that the disaster management bill will sort out many more issues than the plan. I don't know. Minister, we shall be very happy with you, and we are ready to support you to bring up this bill. It is long overdue. We are overweighting. And then the funding, the contingency fund, even among the us, there are people who haven't yet perceived the prioritization of contingency funding. Some people are like, no, let's remain in firefighting. Uganda should remain like that. People have perceptions that we are rendering money idle, even amongst us. Some people have not perceived that way of planning. But members, as Uganda, we need to prepare ourselves adequately, or else we are going to spend a lot, which we even don't have. So we are waiting on the finance minister, but the finance minister is represented here appropriately. The money that you have always appropriated to that other sector, we need response. And when you come to such meetings, we would like to have responses on releases, what was provided for. And we need you to come out clearly here and testify to us. Are you really for funds, establishment of funds? Because recently when we were coming up with the Climate Change Act, the Climate Change Fund was denied at the last moment. And we were informed that no more establishment of funds. Funding baskets are over. So we would like to hear it from you. Before we scratch our brains to establish, come up with governance issues of the fund, will it really be accepted in the proposed bill, such that we don't spend a lot of time there? And my last submission would be on the use of weather forecasts. We cherish Uganda National Meteorological Authority and the work it is doing, but also the Prime Minister's office has always had some mechanisms of sharing some weather forecasts. But the utilization, we are failing to implement the dissemination part of it. When the information is released, how does it reach the final person? The structure is not clear. Me personally, I went to Chigoga, my district, and asked, who receives the weather information forecasts here? And they were all looking at me like this. Or sometimes this production person gets them from this office, where? Who takes it now to the final person? The district production officer receives it in English. Then, there is no money for translation. There is no fuel for dissemination. So, are we really utilizing the weather forecast? Thank you so much. We shall meet another time.
Thank you very much, Honorable Christine. I think that's very serious from Onima there. We have very good information, making sense, but making sense to ourselves. Yes. Yes, I will come to you, Jeff, after this gentleman.
Thank you so much. My name is Stuart Maniraguha from the National Forest Service. There is a general consensus in the discussions so far that the natural disasters we are getting are as a result of climate change. And the minister says agree with me that trees play the biggest role in fighting the natural disasters. And it is therefore important that we focus on issues of mitigation. Now, I would want to pick the thoughts of the panel on where we are placing issues of restoration of degraded ecosystems through tree planting in this entire discussion of the contingency planning and risk disaster management, because the focus I have seen is more on the effects than the causes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manilaguha. The Honourable Minister has another state function awaiting her, and so probably let's give her the microphone for her final words before she could leave us with.
She needs to respond to this question.
Oh, you have a question, the Minister?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Jeff Wadula, my name, CSBAG and JEG Africa. During the 10th Parliament, and by extension, I think Honorable Yalvera will also respond, we amended the PFNA and reduced the amount which we are supposed to finance the contingency fund from 3.5% to 0.5%. What informed that? Because that would have given us about 1.6 trillion for contingency fund, out of which 15% would be for disaster.
Okay. I can see the accountant general here.
We have so many, so I'll stand here and talk because there are many that came. So, well, let me, you want me to answer that one?
I asked you to answer.
I answer all.
You have been
Okay,
directed
no,
to
there,
answer.
let me go on the podium. Because there are so many issues that I really need to clarify.
Okay.
Yes. So thank you, Honorable Minister again, and Honorable Members of Parliament. So there are many issues that came up that I need to clarify as not as a minister, I'm not a minister. I'm a technical person, as the Accountant General. On the issue of release and appropriation. And I thought I'd hinted on it when I was making my presentation. In that when we go to appropriate, we are not like other countries where they have funds that are there. When their budget is 43 trillion, the other day I was, sometime back I was in Singapore, the guy tells me that for me, I only use for the appropriation, I get monies that I sold the state enterprises because it is making money. So the interest that I get is what I use for the annual budget. Now for us, we have to look for that money. And the way we look for it is through the taxes, through non-tax, through the borrowing, which is either external or domestic. Now, once it comes to 1st July, you have appropriated a budget of 45 trillion, let's say. But in the treasury, I can have at most maybe not more than 100 billion. And now take a quarter of that. That means that I need 10 trillion in the first quarter. But I have only 100 billion. So what do I do? Now that's the question. So the question comes and says that, okay, we shall ask government to have continuity. Because as we go along, we are collecting revenue, we are making arrangements to borrow, and so on and so forth. So we keep now handling what's the critical activity of government. And that's why you see we give you what we call a cash limit. So we advise you that, you know, given the collections, this is the maximum of expenditures we can incur in this quarter. Because for us now we are projecting what we are going to collect. We are projecting how long it will take us for us to make arrangements, to have borrowings done. We are projecting that maybe the grants that are supposed to come will come in. Now, in the course of that projection, something doesn't come in. So what do you do? What do you do? So that's the question that now the MPs ask us, that for us here we appropriated 2 trillion. Why have you only released 500 billion? I don't have the 1.5 trillion. I don't have. So that is so that's why we are saying that I think we have now we have as a country to come to reality and say how much are we really worth. You have even seen the other day, you had the executive director, UNRA, saying that you people, I cannot manage all these roads because it's not possible. I don't have the capacity, not in terms of the what, but in terms of the funding for all those roads to be able to do that. So that's the challenge, that when you appropriate, that money is not there. So we have to look for it. Of course, you can now blame us and say that, you know, you are inefficient, you have not negotiated well, you should negotiate, you should collect more. So that's why we, the technical people, now suffer. Because collecting more means maybe increasing taxes, becoming more compliant, and then there is a noise. That's why I say, now stop that one, because you can, because there is a lot of noise. So those are the technical issues that get us a bit of a challenge. Of course, Honourable Member, I did not say that the members of Parliament did not appropriate. No, I think it is a shared responsibility between us, the technocrats, or the executive, who represent the executive, and the members of Parliament for that. But I think I did not say that these members of Parliament who did not appropriate. No, I think we need to see and agree on what we should fund for the contingencies fund. Now, why did we revise from the 3.5 to the 0.5? Because we had to be realistic. Again, it comes to management of the budget. That are you going to take 1.5 trillion and put it there waiting for disaster, when you don't have a hospital, when you don't have a school, when you have to pay salaries? So that is the question. So we weighed and said, okay, let's get a middle ground. Instead of the 3.5, which is too much, let's think about the 0.5. And that is how we agreed on 0.5. Because we even benchmarked, most of them were about 3.5. It was about 0.5 that they were taking as a percentage of their budgets to the contingencies fund. And that is how we came to that. But still you can still even see that the 0.5, we are not also funding it. So this is the dilemma that we have. I guess the Minister have answered all your questions that were put to me. Is there any other question that is not answered? Okay, but of course, as I said on a serious note, now we really need to think about how we handle contingency planning, from the planning up to when the disaster happened. And I liked the questions about from the World Food Program, Madam, where it says that why do you keep the wait for disaster, and yet the preparedness is also important. So I think let's rethink. My office will work with the Office of the Prime Minister to ensure that we work out certain activities, and maybe probably we should even be able to see that if this year we have been allocated 67 billion and we are not able to utilize the 67, we can maybe allocate the 5 to the preparation activities if they are still suffering. So that should be something that we should look through. I thank you very much.
Accountant General Lawrence, thank you so much. Another round of applause. The Minister has another function awaiting her, but just, if I may request for only 2 or 3 minutes, Honourable Minister, so that you listen to one of our humanitarian development partner from the EU ECHO, Morten Peterson, maybe 3 minutes before the Minister leaves.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Morten Peterson. I work for the European Union. I work for the humanitarian department, also called ECHO sometimes. We have been involved in disaster risk reduction and preparedness for, I think, the last 4 years. We have had, both on the humanitarian side and on the development side, about 20 actions for a total amount of about over 25 million euros. That's a bit short of 100 trillion Uganda shillings, I think. So I think we have really set a ball rolling here, and I'm very happy to hear this vigorous debate today. I also share the Honourable Minister's comment about that. I'm also afraid that we may be repeating ourselves in terms of training the disaster management committees over and over and over again, and supporting the district contingency planning processes over and over again. And early warning systems, I remember I worked in this country before in 2004 to 2008. Already at that time we tried to have early warning systems in Cambodia. So that's, I'm a bit worried there, and I think that can be streamlined. But it's good that we have early warning, so we know when things are going to happen, go wrong. It's good we have contingency planning, so we know what to do. But the problem is then how to resource all of this, and that's where I'm particularly happy that there's a lively debate about the resourcing. But that is, of course, not for the European Union to sort that out. That is for Uganda and Ugandans to sort that out. I just want to mention one thing. I was so privileged to sit at the Honourable Minister's table, and I can see that even your notebook is from the Red Cross. And I'm looking at Ryan, and I think we have a well-established Ugandan Red Cross society. I think you have branches like 50, 51 or something like that all over the country, and I think there's really an asset there. You are also an auxiliary to the government. I think there's really an asset there, because the whole district disaster management committee, there was a slide, and I didn't even know there's apparently also a policy committee, then a disaster management committee, then a sub-county disaster management committee. It's a heavy structure. It costs a lot of money. And I think you're covered in 31 districts out of 147 and so on. We have Red Cross. They do excellent work. We have, I think, activated what is called the DREF, the Disaster Relief Emergency Fund, with the Red Cross 3 times this year. Assessor, landslide, floods in Mbale, where I went myself and was told by some of the leadership, some of the problem was actually that the urban plans were not really respected, and people had been building houses in places where at high risk. And then we also activated very early on Ebola preparedness, of course. And then just finally, Minister, we did go to Mount Elgon. It took us a little bit of time, but we did sign a grant with Oxfam for disaster preparedness and response in the Mount Elgon area, which is a high-risk area. It's a consortium with Oxfam and CIS, and ESU Red Cross. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, we are almost coming to the end of our dialogue, but there are some members from the district local government. We have not heard their voice so much. I know, Grace, you are from Madiokolo. Probably we could give you a microphone. We hear what the issues are and the challenges you face, and perhaps what innovative ways you could be giving us this afternoon.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I observe the protocol. Mali Okolo is the district I come from, and prone to lots and lots of hazards or disasters, whatever the case is. But my very first one is, how does information evacuate from the vulnerable person to where they are supposed to be out? When my sister from Amolata talked, I believed in her strongly, because sometimes I, the focal point person, gets information from the Member of Parliament, direct from the villages where these things happen. Unfortunately, or unfortunately, sometimes OPM will respond faster. So there is that interrelation gap. How do we cover it up? Now, I want to give a certain scenario specific to Mario Kolo. As far as hazard inducement is concerned, Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry, and Fisheries, I hope they are there, together with the Ministry of Water and Environment, are carrying out a development project in Pakwach district, rice scheme, irrigation scheme. Now they managed to do environment issues downstream. And you know what happened? They dammed the river and then there has been backflow. People upstream have been swallowed up. Their houses are in water, and that information was brought to office of the Prime Minister. Now it brings me the three people up front. How are those people going to be helped? I think up to about now 500 acres of land belonging to different people. Assessment was done. When she talked about food security, by the time that backflow came, it just came and swallowed up. Millet was about to be harvested. The other lady had just harvested her tomatoes once, and that is when a box of tomatoes costed 400,000. She lost all that. The Egyptian person employed 350 people. Those youth lost their jobs because now there was nothing for them to do. Irrigation skits were submerged. How can these people be helped? That is my question.
Thank you very much. Okay, in the interest of time, and I'm going to give the panelists, if they wish, maybe to give their parting remarks on the dialogue. But if you have this one burning issue, and you're one and you're not very more than one, you have the opportunity to ask. However, let me just give them, let me start from this side, very quickly, less than a minute, your parting shot. And then I will call Commissioner Catherine Ahimbisibwe to give us the way forward. And then we shall have a group photo taken before the minister leaves.
Thank you very much, moderator. You know, my approach is administrative most of the time. Mine is looking at the law, looking at the bill, looking at the regulations, but we want regulations which are very serious, which can help us, and we need enforcement. That makes the laws respected. Failure to have policies, regulations, laws respected, sometimes even what we want to do, we end up not doing it.
The minister is working on a bill, so that is going to happen. Yes, yes.
Is what I pray for.
All right, thank you. Dr. Kanahe.
Thank you, moderator. Just two things. The multi-hazard contingency planning is a process, and we are already working with the Office of the Prime Minister and the other ministries in putting up a general curriculum, such that if somebody is going to replicate such a process, it is streamlined. which leads me to another the point that the gentleman from National Forest Authority was talking about. How is this catered for in the disaster management contingency plan? When the process is being developed, there is a topic on integrated risk management that covers both ecosystems management restoration, climate change adaptation, and DRR. So that's where that component comes in.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Yarugaba.
Parliament, of course, commits to continuously ensure that we have enough funding, and if need be, maybe change that. We had originally planned 3.5 reduced to 0.5, but that alone is not bad enough. It's bad, but not very bad.
But what is bad enough?
Assure you that we shall at least ensure that we continuously make sure that that money is available and put proper use. We shall also continuously make sure that there is legislation put in place to enforce and empower our local communities, most especially the local governments and local communities.
Mr. Semakula.
So thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me. It was very enlightening. And as I said, I've taken some points that I need to really implement in my office. And I think I would love to coordinate more with the Office of the Prime Minister so that we can see how best we can work on contingency and contingency planning. So I thank you very much.
Thank you, and lastly, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much. Meanwhile, we pledge as a coordination body, also the Prime Minister, to speed up the bill principles. And after that, we shall look at to review the policy, which is really old. The policy was done in 2011, and I think that is a long time ago. And the other request I want to make, CS-BAG and also the platform, we need to map all the organizations that are working with us in these interventions. The way we know all the organizations that are working with us in refugees, and we know what they are doing, so that we be able to trace the impact and also what they're doing there. But so far, I want to say thank you so much for all your support. You're always ahead of government. You've always been the first to give us the assessment report, and we really appreciate it. Even when the district comes, the district has not been working alone, because you get there first, and then you are able to work with the district to give us the information. I want to thank you all, and I wish you a blessed day.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for our panel. I want to thank you so much. Before you take your seat, maybe we can take a group photo here, so that for the panel and I think Julius, you could join in. I don't know whether they're going to stand. Or, the photographers should give us advice on how we can do this. Yeah. Who else is supposed to join here? Oh, Jane, Madam Jane Ochaya, Oxfam. I would want Agnes, Dr. Agnes. Honorable Christine Morton. Honorable Kaya, okay. And right after that, I'm going to request Acting Commissioner Catherine Ahimbi-Sibwe to come forward. You'll be giving us the way forward. I understand, ladies and gentlemen, lunch is ready. The coupons are being given, and they will advise you where you can have your lunch. And also, I want to thank you so much, Honorable Minister, members of Parliament, for gracing this dialogue.
To Acting Commissioner Catherine. They are close.
Thank you. I'm going to make a presentation on the way forward. I know a lot has been said, but we need to leave this place when we are aware of what we have agreed on and then how to move forward. Way forward, IOM support to national disaster preparedness and management bill through supporting consultative workshops. Advocate for a compliance certificate that requires district local governments to contingency planning. With the support of the NDP, we have already embarked on developing the mainstreaming DRR guidelines, and it's going to lead to a certificate of compliance. So this is work that is already ongoing. Then permanent funds should be set aside for the district local governments that are consistently affected by disasters. Civil society come to the aid of Parliament and support them in terms of addressing, legislating, overseeing, so that planning is effective to save lives and livelihoods of communities. Disaster risk management needs to be strengthened to take into account contemporary migration issues, ensuring adaptation to natural hazards. There's need for bankable solutions in line with disaster risk management, need for capacity building and financial support to the district local governments, especially in terms of resources, harmonization and coordination between implementing partners and government departments, ensure maximization of outputs from different disaster preparedness management activities. There's need to rethink to attain a holistic management of contingency funding, ensure preparedness, anticipatory actions captured in addition to response activities, prioritized as per PFMA/contingency fund. The focus should be extended to causes of disasters in addition to impacts of disasters. Create a fund that is not tied to appropriation and is funded outside the financial arrangement. This minimizes the competing priorities eating into the contingency fund. Members of Parliament commit to fast-track the National Disaster Preparedness and Management Bill. Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development should commit to fully operationalize the contingency fund and seek support of Parliament in translating this into success. District local governments need to be empowered to prepare and respond to disasters, including support to mainstreaming. The national policy and bill for disaster preparedness and management should ensure inclusiveness through capturing persons with disabilities along with other marginalized groups. Whole of government effort to ensure appropriations are followed by both Parliament and Executive. Focus and attention needs to be provided to other hazards that affect food production, additional floods and drought. Dissemination of early warning needs to be strengthened through translation and dissemination to the end mind user. ECHO remains committed to supporting government through the different implementing partners. Enforcement needs to be considered strongly within the National Disaster Preparedness and Management Bill to quell environment risk management. Then general curriculum for disaster risk management as indicated by Uganda Red Cross. I observe there is one key that is missing. Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development has pledged to work together with OPM to provide funding towards preparedness from the contingencies fund. I know this activity is already supported by WFP through the PRO-ACT. So I don't think we shall have issues on this one since the Accountant General has committed. You know, when you read the PFMA Act 2015, the contingencies fund is response to natural disasters and leaves a gap for preparedness. So this is where we need to concentrate. Unless there's any comments, adjustments.
things which are brought out, very violently. The fund should not be looked at response at all. Look at fairness and education and data generation. One of the areas I wanted to bring out, there is one thing which we have forgotten, and it's a silent killer. Metrology by mandate is supposed to put stations on monitoring air quality. And media has written a lot about air quality. And that was one of the issues I wanted to raise here before even our members of parliament, but I will not give it away. One of the silent killer which the government is going to experience is going to be related to air quality, and the knowledge has not been given facilitation of funds. We are supposed to put monitoring stations, almost what I would now call, or what we call cities at present, but in Kampala, we desire to put in every division, and it's by mandate through World Medical Organization, that's the mandate of metrology, was approved, and we don't have any. And I would refer to an incident of 2016 where Uende and Kamuli were hit by hailstorm and then strong winds. The members of parliament did not accept. I remember by then the commissioner, Mr. Ward, called me. They have rejected the report and they are saying yes. So the issue is data is very important and gives direction. When Mr. Ward, by then the commissioner, called me, I said, we tried to put a station there, and I gave a submission. What was a wind gust by then? What amount? The MPs and cabinet said that now we have the information, and that was when it was cleared very fast, and the beneficiaries were given what they wanted. So the issue is the fund, the contingent fund should not be looked at only for response. And I remember the accountant general was emphasizing that they look it at being redundancy. So we should focus it on preparedness and mitigation and data generation. And one critical area for metrology. In fact, we need to put air monitoring equipment, even right over our Lake Victoria. We need that equipment, and we don't have. But when you go to Kenya on the other side, for them they have. Tanzania on the other side, they have even right over the lake. But for the case of Uganda, we don't have. And we have even will be able to identify some of these industries which are major pollutants and take corrective action. So that is an area where we still have a gap. So the fund should be moved. The relief expand the fund for preparedness, mitigation, and then data generation for some of the hazards which we have never tried to pay attention. But they will become very, very serious, and they may be even silent to do that. When you read about it, you find that it's a serious
Thank you,
issue.
Betty, and the rapporteur for the workshop has taken note. Also, WFP now, you see, we need to bring more other institutions on board as we discuss with the Ministry of Finance. Members,
thank you very much for the opportunity. I'd just like to hint more on his issue of data generation. I serve at the village level as a general secretary at my village in Mutungwe, and I'm also the operations lead for the Semantic Network Initiative. All of the issues that we've been talking about are addressing the what, the when, the who, the where, and the how, but it's not directly addressed to the why. With the different generations that come up, the why is, why are these things happening? To my mother, she grew up in the era of political insecurity, and she's cutting down trees because she's afraid somebody is going to climb up there, probably a thief, and be able to look down into our bungalow and see what we are doing and probably steal from us. I tried to discourage her from cutting down the jackfruit tree simply because I just wanted something for free. I didn't want to buy jackfruit, yet we have a jackfruit tree that I can easily get somebody to climb and I get what to eat for free. My generation wants free things. And these problems are going to be passed on generation to generation. We are going to come up to be doing that. the same things all over again, simply because this is not communicated clearly as to the why. Why are you planting that tree? To a coffee farmer, planting trees means the coffee is going to die because of too much shade. To a young person like me, perhaps my mom was a leader, perhaps an NGO came and told them about the importance of planting trees, but I wasn't there. I do not know why that tree is there. She probably put a ribbon, but because I want to set up a business, I want to make money, I'm going to cut down that tree without knowing the implications of why those trees need to be planted. So that's just an example. So ideally, as we deal with the policies, with the law, our dear Accountant General, probably I was paying most attention to him because I like listening to people talking about money. But he stressed that law has a purpose. I'm a Christian and the law has, I'm a Christian and we have 10 commandments. But in those 10 commandments, there's nowhere that it states that when you jump, you're going to fall down. That's the law of gravity, but it's not written in the 10 commandments. We are lucky to have intelligent people that have come up with laws and policies in place. Probably they learned by experience the danger of not having those laws in place and probably put them in place for advantage. But young people do not know that. People who are present in the formulation of those laws do not know that. Our Accountant General says he's coming up with taxes, but somebody who's paying those taxes, perhaps a private business owner, is like they do not care about our needs, they're stressing us with taxes, but they do not know why is that tax being put in place. So ideally, when we address the why, it speaks to people who won't need to actually mobilize people to raise money from donors and whatnot. If people on their small means and capacities can actually contribute the small they can towards the achievement of all these objectives that we are putting in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Allow me to thank the organizers for this meeting, CSBAG and IOM. It has been a success and also the participation has been a good one. Thank you once again.
Another big round of applause to Commissioner Catherine. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. IOM, thank you CSBAG, thank you OPM, thank you Oxfam, and all of you district local government colleagues of Kano. Thank you for having everybody this good dialogue. We have ended on an optimistic note, which is a good thing. And lunch is ready, ladies and gentlemen. It's on Canaan, I'm told, restaurant, which is on first floor, ground floor. And please go after and pick your lunch coupon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.